Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another Strategoi Faction Focus video. Ryan back. Hopefully, this is literally recorded the same day as my son's video, so hopefully my voice is sounding more normal and less nurgly. But I'm back to cover the OBR Faction Focus today. The ideal was that I was going to do this because Jonas is sick right now. I was going to do this with Nick. We got on the call, and for some reason, my Max audio setup, which Max have traditionally had a really rough time. You have to do like extra stuff to get like the audio that's coming in and also your internal microphone to get sent to the right source so that it all can be recorded at the same time. I had this all figured out at one point, and then I guess I updated the system and my settings got erased and it was nowhere to be found. I tried to solve it, spent an hour with Nick on the line, and just didn't work. So I just interviewed Nick to get his take as a OBR player who was literally training for Worlds with OBR for a good chunk of this past year. To get his opinion on this. And so we're on the same page now. So I'll try to represent Nick's ideas as best I can in this video. Furthermore, I want to shout out Nick's channel. I already did it in the Suns video, but today is the start of their channel on a public kind of forum, because they've been working on this for like 6 months, maybe longer, getting the battle reports at Threshold Tactics all figured out. I'll put a link down below again, but really want to shout out the great work that Tomejas, Nick and Kai, and again, I think there might be some other people, Jeffrey, involved. So it's pretty impressive what they've accomplished, and it's only going to go up from here. So I hope you guys show them some love. If you like battle reports, especially if you want to see something that's nice and trim and focused on the competitive elements, this is the right channel for you, I think. So it's definitely adding another great voice to the channels that are already out there. So go check them out, and I've got a link below. And, obviously keep the buzz going here. Interesting thing about doing this OBR review is that while this isn't the index, some of you out there in OBR land might be aware that because I knew less about OBR at one point, not too long ago, right before their 3rd edition Battletome came out about a year ago, I decided to make a series of videos where I went through the Battletome and filmed myself writing in it as I do, showing you how I usually process a new set of rules. And that was probably my best opportunity to do so. I don't have that kind of opportunity anymore, really, but I recorded a whole bunch more videos than I actually got to publish because we slowed down on the channel. So the problem is those rules are about to fall off, and it's not really all that useful. So I hope you guys got as much use as you could out of the OBR stuff that I did, if you found that interesting. Let me know if you did, and I'm happy to try to recreate that either with OBR again, with the index, or with something else. So just let me know. But that was a really fun project, and it's a bummer I didn't finish posting all the videos that I recorded. Anyway, let's get on with the review here. Okay, so OBR. Scrolling down to the battle traits. All right, what did OBR used to do? And just a quick reference to this, because sorry, I didn't mean to pull that up. Just a quick reference to what's going on here. The reason why we're comparing OBR to what they used to do is because first off, if you've got a sense for how it plays now, you want to know what's going to stay, what's different, what can you take away from that. But also, we don't have all the information for 4th edition, obviously, because these are just kind of previews of the indexes. And almost no one has actually played 4th edition. So what we're doing here is trying to get a baseline of what GW does from one of their known full set of rules to what it goes to, and comparing that transition, that delta, if you will, the difference between 3rd and 4th, from one battle tome to the next, to the next, to the next. And that way we can get a sense for what things seem, and again, I want to emphasize seem, because we don't know. It's a lot of shots in the dark right now, but I'm trying to do my best to represent this in a authentic light, both positive and negative. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think OBR came out on top on this one. Compared, again, to the other changes we've seen, not to just what they were in 3rd edition. Everything got nerfed. Like, every faction got nerfed some amount. But I think this came out pretty on top compared to some of the other things we've seen. Right now, I would have to say halfway through the faction reviews, I think OBR, Feck, and Skaven might be my top 3 for armies that I think came out really strong, again, with what they've shown us thus far. And that Suns and Ogres probably have the roughest rule set right now. But that doesn't mean anything. We're going to come back. Jonas and I've already agreed we're going to come back at the end of all these and do a recap and try to look at them not from just the lens of what changed, but also a lens of comparing them against each other. But again, GW is not balancing these articles against one another necessarily. They're just showing us what they want to show us. So they might not be showing the strongest thing from any faction. And I fully anticipate that many of my opinions on these things will change as more information comes in. But I like comparing it to what it's been, because to me that's interesting. But again, take everything with a grain of salt and try to stay positive. I've heard people say that it's too positive, and I've heard people say it's too negative. I'm just trying to keep it real as best I can. But I'm just one person in the world, so we'd love to keep everyone interested in finding this valuable, but I understand if you find it too negative or too positive. So anyway, shout out to all you guys listening to the channel. Thanks so much for your feedback, and we're really looking forward to 4th edition. I've tried to mention something positive in every one of these videos, so that's just setting the stage here. So OBR used to have a 6+ ward for everyone. Like we've seen in a bunch of the other ones, that just got moved on the War Scrolls, so don't worry about that. They used to have Naterite weapons so that the non-mounts, so basically the riders, the non-companions, had exploding 6s. That got moved onto the War Scrolls, so don't worry about that. And even there's one profile we see here that got it when it didn't have it, which I'm super psyched about. Low-key, this reveal has one of my favorite unit changes I've seen thus far, which is kind of an example of another thing that inspires me about looking at the changes, is because some units went, just like when we get a new battle tome, some units went from being kind of not used for a whole season to then being good relative to some of the other things we've seen, and then all of a sudden they get to be taken. And if you're a fan of that model, it's just awesome, because then you're like, yes, I feel like I can use this both competitively and get to use this awesome model. So that gets me psyched. And then if something like the Sloppity Bilepiper falls out a bit, he had his a very long time in the sun. I don't feel like that's all that bad, even though I do feel like they nerfed him a bit into the ground. But let's keep going. Another thing OBR had was these, what they used to call Relentless Discipline, which was their extreme amount of CP generation. Now, it's interesting, when they talked about CP generation being limited in one of the earliest articles that we got for the 4th edition preview articles, they said, well, don't worry, even though we're not going to be generating CPs any other way, OBR is still going to have a way to do this. Now, I imagined they were just going to literally generate CPs that could only be used for the non-standard command abilities. Well, it turns out that they changed their mind. Well, not changed their mind, but they didn't do anything like that at all. It's much more similar, what they have now, to the orders system that Cities of Sigmar has. And they even said down below, in the text below this article, or this part of the article, that they wanted to make sure it felt different than the way Cities does it. So you'll have to let me know if you think they managed to achieve that goal. Because to me it feels actually quite similar, but I'm interested to see what different perspectives there are. And so basically what they did is they combined the CP generation with the Ossiarch commands ability. So they used to have 7 different command abilities that could be used as many times as you wanted in a given phase, as long as you had the CPs for them. And you were generating a crazy amount of CPs. And some of the War Scrolls even had Ossiarch commands that could also be used multiple times. So like if your Mortek Guard had one, I think it was to become unrendable, then every unit, as long as you had the right amount of CPs of Mortek Guard, could use that. So what they have here, though, are 3 different types of abilities. You've got movement phase abilities, the first row there, charge phase, and then combat phase. And they all work very similarly. They have the keyword Relentless Discipline, which is the keyword that we're working with here. And they all get initiated from a hero. So they're going to feel kind of like how command abilities used to work, where it largely came from heroes or unit champions. But that's the unit champion part's gone. So, and what they pretty much do now is throw up a bubble, okay? They throw up a holier-than bubble of 12 inches, and then it impacts all the units around them in one way or the other. Which means that it's kind of like multiple units are getting to use this. But, unfortunately, you can only do each one of those commands. No, not each one. You can only do per phase 1 Relentless Discipline, as it says here. If no friendly units have used a Relentless Discipline ability this phase, then you can go forward and do it. So that means only one of these per turn is going to happen, but it will pop up a 12-inch bubble. Only one of these and only one of these. But that's per turn, so it happens in the enemy's turn as well. So per battle round, you're seeing max 6 things go off. So let's look at what it's doing. So the one that's the most different, I guess you could say, from the others is this one, because what it does is it generates a 12-inch bubble, kinda. What happens, and I'm glad they cleared this up, during the declare step, all friendly OBR units wholly within 12 inches of the heroes are those targets. Okay? So, are the targets for this ability. And so they immediately receive 2 inches to their move characteristic for the rest of the turn. The rest of the abilities create a bubble around the hero that only apply while something is standing within the bubble at the moment that they try to use it. So to kind of give you an example, coordinated charge here gives them +1 to charge rolls while they are wholly within 12 inches of that hero. So the difference here is about timing. So if you want 2 extra inches of movement, you have to have been standing around the hero when they chose to use this movement phase ability, and then you can move and go do your thing. So depending on what the timing of the movement phase abilities is, I'm assuming the hero could move, get within range of these guys, then blow up the bubble, and then all those units move. But it's not saying you could like create this bubble and then as you move around the field or whatever, like you had people that use it at the beginning when you created the bubble and they're within your 12 now, and then you move and then whoever's in within your 12-inch bubble later after the move now gets to use it even if they weren't in it at the beginning. That is not how this works. This one right here, though, does work in the way that if you move, this is the +1 to charge one, it's only applicable for the people who are standing around there at the moment that they try to charge. So if they're wholly within range of the hero at the moment of charging, they're getting +1 to charge. Now let's talk about these two in combo, because this used to be, the +2-inch move used to be +3. Now, you might say, well, they lost 1 inch, that sucks. And in a certain sense, of course they did. But if that unit was planning on charging that turn, this is giving them +1 to charge. So functionally, they balance each other out, and it goes back to something like +3 inches to move. It's not 100% that, because if you fail your charge, then you don't get to take advantage of that +1 to charge roll, right? And you're just stuck at having been 1 inch further away than you maybe wanted to be. So that's, its own thing. But there's also an argument to say they redeploy at the end of your movement phase and move outside of the range of your charge, or your 2-inch move. Now you're getting +1 inch based off of where you were, right? And then they don't know where you're going. It's a subtle difference, but it could be something that plays some kind of role here. And I'm going to try to throw in Nick's opinion about these things. He was talking about one of the big things about these in general, that if you have units that are getting too far away from your heroes, then all of a sudden they're not going to be able to use any of these. And that's obvious here, but that's not how it used to work. So if your Kavalos Deathriders go off to flank to go take an objective or something, they're kind of left by themselves. Maybe that increases the value of taking the Liege Kavalos so that you've got a hero that's following them around. And I've always liked power pair combos, as long as the heroes can stay alive, that kind of thing. So, maybe there's something there. But, these are pretty interesting, I guess. And the coordinated charge ability, by the way, is new. We used to have 7 abilities. I'll talk about what we lost or what got changed around as it comes up. But anyway, this one's new, and then this one is debuffed a little bit here. Let's look at the other movement one here in the movement phase. This one is just creating a wholly within bubble around the hero, where if a unit used a retreat ability, they can use charge. Okay, so how is this working timing-wise? It says, for the rest of the turn, while they are wholly within 12 inches of that hero, friendly OBR units can use charge abilities even if they used a retreat ability in the same turn. So this does not mean that they gain retreat and charge if they were standing within 12 when he chose to use this. It means that he puts up a static bubble so they could retreat into that bubble later and then be able to charge. So the timing is important. They used to have a similar ability. It was just, again, like all of these, a command ability. Let's look at the Counter-Strike ability. And actually, I want to compare the Counter-Strike to Bludgeon. because they kind of swapped what they did. Nick pointed this out to me. Okay, so countercharge is in the charge phase, right? And a hero is generating this bubble that's giving your friendly units melee weapons anti-charge +1 rend. What does that mean? If they get charged, they get 1 better rend on their profile. Just because they got charged. I don't think it means... Well, I don't know exactly. It could mean when they get charged, they get +1 rend even against units that didn't charge that turn, or it could mean only against units that charged. I'm not 100% sure about that wording. Maybe we've seen it somewhere. If you know, type it in the comments below. But anyway, so it's giving them +1 rend if they're defensive, right? And what it used to do, Counter-Strike, was give them +1 wound if they got charged with melee weapons, okay? Now, if we look down here, Bludgeon is used to give them +1 rend on demand, basically. And now it's giving them +1 to wound in combat attacks. You can have both of these in effect, by the way, because in the charge phase you could do this one as long as you know you're getting charged or whatever, and then and then in the combat phase you can do this one. So you could get the best of both worlds, which previously was possible because Counter-Strike was used in the charge phase, and then and if I'm not mistaken, yeah. And then Bludgeon was used in your combat phase. So that's still possible, but the sequencing is different, and you have to kind of earn the rend. And Nick was talking about, like, the meta is getting less save stacky, and so even though this does feel like a nerf, if the rest of the meta is coming with it, it's not that bad of a thing, and he thinks for the health of the game that this is a better situation because this feels more broken, and now there's a way that the opponent can kind of play around it instead of just always knowing one unit's going to get +1 to rend. So anyway, I still think those are both pretty good. And then the last ability we haven't talked about is Impenetrable Ranks. This is giving your guys a 5+ ward for the rest of the turn, but it's initiated in the combat phase, which implicitly means that it's not happening with shooting attacks. This used to be able to be triggered anytime you were targeted by an attack. So that could be in the shooting phase, that could have been in the combat phase, and it could have even been in the hero phase if they had a way to shoot or fight in the hero phase, because they were still attacks. They were just in a different phase. So in a sense, this got nerfed a little bit, but I still think it's a great ability. And then creating a 12-inch Holy Vin bubble of 5+ ward in the combat phase is not bad. So the big difference here is you're still gonna, like, you're probably more reliant on your heroes because your CP generation before was based off of the number of units that you had, right? So this is another reason why it's good to compare to the other things, because people's current collections are probably based on what was previously necessary. Let's say before you only had 3 heroes in your army because it functioned just fine giving commands to each of the units. But now you know, oh hey, in getting ready for my OBR in 4th edition, this is very hero-centric. So maybe I need to bump that up to 4 or 5 heroes in a list and then still have a 5-drop army that doesn't have any auxiliary units. Pretty great. Now I have, something I can prepare for. So this is one of those advantages, I think, to looking at what you had and what you need probably going into the next edition. Okay, let's move on. Oh, well, one other thing I want to say is what the little things they lost. They lost Unflinching Coordination, which was basically if a hero fought, then he could make another unit fight immediately thereafter. And they also lost Reknit Construct, which was a healing ability. Nick was talking about how those were probably his 2 least used Ossiarch commands. So I think if you had to cut something out of this list, those are pretty easy to cut. All right. And keep in mind that, sorry, I keep saying I'm going to move on. Keep in mind that even though you had a ton of CPs, by the time you're the second turn of a battle round, because you only generated those CPs mainly at the beginning of the battle round, by the time the end of the battle round came around, even though you had like maybe 8 CPs or something, there were often times when you ran out. So now you're not running out of them, and you're still using your CPs for the ones that everyone's using. All out defense, all out attack, covering fire maybe, countercharge, power through, these things. So magical intervention, rally. So, I think in a certain kind of way, this is a buff, because then you're not debating where you're putting those CPs. Anyway, now we're moving on. So we've got a very straightforward formation here. This is adding +1 to casting rolls for friendly Ossiarch Bonereapers infantry wizards. Now, there remains a question of what type of keyword Catacross is going to have, because he's not a monster, right? I mean, if I look at his his war scroll here, he is not a monster on his old war scroll. He could be a monster now. I can't imagine he's a war machine. And he's not well, he's not a wizard, right? So that's I don't even know why I'm talking about this. So excuse me. But that is a good question. What is his keyword going to be? So he was, unless he becomes a wizard all of a sudden. So my apologies. I was debating this earlier with myself, and now I'm realizing how stupid that is. Okay, Archon the Black, though, is a wizard. That's a big one, but he's clearly a monster. So I guess that means all the heroes that aren't, Archon. All the wizards that aren't Archon. So +1 to casting rolls, pretty good, but it's a base level kind of thing. Depends on how important your casting is going to be, which would bring us to this guy. Empower Naterite weapons. As I mentioned, all of the guys' non-companion attack profiles, combat melee profiles, now have exploding hits, basically. If you roll 6 to hit, you get 2 hits that go through. Mathematically, this equates to +1 to hit. It has the same impact, but it can stack with +1 to hit, which makes it better if you were planning on getting a +1 to hit somewhere else. And now that you can bump it up to triggers on 5s, it's actually better than +1 to hit, especially if you stack it. Now, the ability used to have a 24-inch range, but it was wholly within. And now that coherency is tighter and it's just within, then it might not be as big of a decrease in range as it might seem on the surface of things. And it's unlimited. So if you've got, we're going to see 2 casters here that are both 2-level casters, which means they could do like their War Scroll spell or something else from the lore, and also do this. So you could be giving out this like 5+ exploding hits to more than one unit. And unfortunately, it's only to combat attacks, because we're going to see a profile later that's for shooting, but still very neat. Very neat. Okay, let's move on to a guy that I don't think anyone saw coming for one of these articles. Vokmortian. Nick said, man, I never had a reason to take this dude before, and now I do, which is another reason it's cool to look at like the old war scrolls, is because maybe you're like, well, I should go buy this model before it sells out if you like what he's doing. He's got a cool thing going on, but let's look at the basics here. He's unique, as we already knew. Like I said, all the war scrolls have 6+ ward now. He's a 2-level wizard, as he always was. He lost a point of health, but, not a big deal. His shooting profile stayed the same. It just can't shoot in combat anymore. And his melee situation got functionally a little bit better, because he got +1 attack, -1 to hit. But that actually works out to being more damage than he previously had. Now, what he previously had was basically an ability that if he was in combat with someone, on a 3-up, your opponent had to spend a combat to pick him as the target for its attack. Now, first off, you probably don't want this guy in target. He's not tanky enough. Second, it's only going on a 3-up, right? And then, yes, you could do it every turn, but it's only if they were targeting him, so that they had to spend, what's it called? They must spend a command point to target him. Sure, that's defensive and nice, I guess, but I wouldn't try to put this guy in combat. Now, from once per battle, in any hero phase, for the rest of that turn, they're going to have to spend, a unit that's within 12 inches, is going to have to spend ACP to use any non-fight core ability. So they list some of them down here. So that would include moving, retreating, shooting, charging. Nick described this as kind of like a Bellicor ability, which is very cool. Now, you can only do it once per game, but this guy might not stick around in combat for more than one turn anyway. So functionally, I see it as only an upgrade. And considering how important these command points are in the game now, I think this is a great ability. It's got a lot of tech potential, and Nick was mentioning if there's some kind of way to teleport him just outside 9, then you could go put him over there, and then boom. I don't know if there will be a teleport that he has access to, but that could definitely be some tech. Or otherwise, you keep him around your dudes, and then when they come in to try to fight you, you pinpoint this one Bellicor unit you want to do. Granted, it's once per battle, any hero phase, and he's unique, so you can't stack it or anything, but still cool. And then his spell. This was, Nick pointed this out, this was a spell that used to be in the lore that kind of got moved onto his War Scroll. His old War Scroll spell used to be basically a mini Hand of Dust, where he had to be within 1 inch of a target, again in combat, which is really not his role. And as GW has said, in redesigning these War Scrolls, they've been trying to make things feel like they function the way they want to play. Like you're not asking something of them that they're just not good at. So what he's doing now is picking a visible enemy unit within 18 inches and then picking a friendly unit wholly within 18 inches. That's kind of a wording we see often now, where targeting an enemy unit has to be just within, because they might want to string it out to turn this off. And then when you're targeting your own units, you need to be a little bit more aware of your bubbles to be wholly within. So until the start of your next turn, they become bound. And every time that enemy unit tries to target the friendly unit that it's bound with an ability. It could be a combat phase ability. It could be literally fight. It could be shoot. It could be maybe a shooting phase ability. It could be all kinds of things, because almost everything's an ability now. They just have to officially be the target of that ability. So like charging them wouldn't count. They are not the target of that charge. Then you roll a d3 on a 2-up, which again would be on a 3-up. Inflict an amount of mortal damage equal to that roll. And if the bound enemy unit is destroyed by the ability, do not resolve the effect of the enemy ability. So if it was like some kind of debuff or mortal wounds ability or something like that, then there you go. So it doesn't go through. Now, what it used to do, just by comparison, it was for the rest of the battle that you picked that enemy unit, and then if they made any kind of attacks against a friendly Ossiarch Bonereapers unit on a 3-up, which is still a 3-up because a D3's 2-up is still a 3-up, that enemy unit suffered D3 mortal wounds. But I see this spell as having gotten a buff, and I don't know how popular it was to use this spell, but if it is popular, and by moving it onto a War Scroll to make it his War Scroll spell, and considering he's unique, it really gives you a reason to take him. So I'm curious for the OBR players out there, how crucial this spell was for you before, and I think it's only gotten buffed here. It only lasts for that turn, but then you can re-choose new targets for the next, well, not that turn, until you're starting next hero phase, but then the next time you do it, you can choose a new target. So that's pretty cool. Also makes me wonder, how does this work if you do this in your turn, and then as magical intervention, you do it in your opponent's turn? Can both of those stay active? Because it says until the start of your next turn. That's a question that holds for all kinds of spells, actually, but I'm curious about that interaction. Okay. So, the Mortisan Soulmason. Let me get some water here. Okay, Soulmason. This boy is sitting on... I never had seen these legs before. I think this is really awesome, because the art that they had in the 3rd edition book it cut off like around his feet here. So I had no idea that it had these derpy bone feet things. It's weird that he only moves 5, but I guess it's kind of slow. Cool model. All right, so his profile, his weapon wheel stayed the same, or his characteristics wheel, and then his personal attacks, he got +1 attack, but -1 to hit and wound, and the damage went from being flat 2 to D3. The output gets nerfed if you do the math on it a little bit, but again, you don't really need this guy in combat. And then his companion's attacks got really nerfed. 2 attacks, it went -2 to hit, so it's at 5s and 4s, so -1 to wound, still -1/1. But you're not taking this guy to do damage, are you? He's a 2-caster, so that's already cool. There aren't that many 2-casters, all things considered, in the average army. So we've already seen 2 of these guys being 2-casters is pretty cool. Okay, so what does he do? He's got a spell. You pick a friendly, visible OBR unit, wholly within 12, and then it gains strike first for the rest of the turn. Just the turn, not until you're following hero phase, start of your turn. Now, what did it used to do? It also gave +1 to wound before, but it was only targeting, it had a bigger range, twice as much range actually. It was 24 inches wholly within, now it's this within 12, so that's interesting. But it only could target Mortek Guard and Kavalos Deathriders, kind of like your basic troops, the slow version, the fast version, if you want to call it that. And giving it strike first, remember we have another source of +1 to wound in the combat phase now, of that whole bubble, so that it's not overlapping with that. And also giving strike first, pretty cool. And can be any unit now, so any OBR unit. So that's pretty neat, I think. I think there's definitely some tech here for that. It's a little bit of a high casting value, but again, we saw that you could get +1 to cast, and he's a 2-caster. So I don't know how crucial this is. Let me know down below. Certainly you're not using him for melee, but pretty interesting. That being able to hand out strike first. And that's an ability that I think we've seen in a couple other places here, right? Okay, moving down to the Necropolis Stalkers. If I had to pick, if I'm keeping it real, I had to pick one unit that got nerfed the hardest here, it would be these guys. But overall, I'm very positive about what's happening here. So you have two different kits you can build with this kit. You have the Necropolis Stalkers, which were kind of this modular, they have 4 heads. They could choose a modular aspect, which they still do, but the aspects change quite drastically. They had a slightly higher move characteristic. They also had a command ability, Ossiarch command. They could give themselves to have run and charge, and then fly over terrain features, in the same manner as flying models. I don't know if that was as important. But now, so they lost a point of health, which also meant that correspondingly their control. They basically kept the health characteristic and control values synergistic with what it is now in 3rd edition. So if you went to 4, as soon as you crossed that threshold to 5 health, you had a control value of 2. But they brought it down, and then they brought maybe their control down to 1. That's definitely something. And then on their attack profile here, they used to choose, well, they didn't choose. They had one guy that was an elite guy that had like 50% more output, if you did the math on it. Anyway, they have the same profile basically from the regular spirit blades, but the problem here is that their kind of stances they have, their aspects, aren't doing the same kind of stuff. You've got one that's doing subtracting 3 from control scores for enemy units while they're in combat with this unit. I guess that's interesting, but remember their control score also got pulled down, so it's kind of just making up for that in a way. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target this unit. It's not giving that unit -1 to hit in general. It's only if they attack this unit. This is probably the best one. It's turning off wards for damage points inflicted by this unit's combat attacks. And considering they've got -2 rend, they could get some damage through, right? Every model on average is doing 2 and a 2/9 damage before you take into account for the rend. And then with -2 rend, it's just 5/6 of that output against a 4-up save. So pretty good. And then if it turns off the ward, assuming wards are still around as much as they currently are, then that's meaningful. If wards kind of disappear, then this isn't doing a whole lot. But you do choose in the combat phase before you fight which one of these you're going to use. And so you can customize this on the basis of what you think you're going to need. And then, let's see. And then the last one is this unit's melee weapons have anti-hero +1 rend. So obviously you don't choose this one if you're not in combat with a hero, but bumping it up to -3, pretty good, right? So it has its role, but Nick was talking about how he needs to see the Immortus Guard's War Scroll to have a feel for what these guys are meant to do anymore. Because what these guys used to do was kind of get to choose an offensive ability. And apart from the anti-hero +1 rend and maybe the ward thing, they're not as universally applicable as offensive abilities. So like they used to have a +1 to hit, +1 to save for more defense to put them up to a 3-up save, +1 to wound, or +1 to damage, which could actually make them perform better than what the Immortus Guard were doing. And then of course they're not as fast as they used to be. They're still this 6-inch move, but they're not getting run and charge. So, the jury's out on this, but I still think it's a cool unit, and it really depends on how they diversify the roles between this unit and what their complementary elite kind of infantry unit is doing. Okay, let's go on to my favorite upgrade of almost anything I've seen in 3rd edition yet. This is enough to make me want to play this army. Anyone that knows me, I am, my friends probably really don't like this about me, but I love shooting armies. And this unit is one of my favorite war machines model-wise, but it's been kind of languishing in the no one takes it land. And man, this thing got a huge glow up. So what's it doing? It used to have 3 different profiles, and you had to choose which of those 3 profiles you were going to do. They all had a minimum range of 6, so if your enemy got within 6 inches, you couldn't shoot anymore. That's actually kind of similar to what it has with not shooting in combat. So in a sense, it only got a buff in that sense, because a lot of units that can't shoot in combat anymore used to be able to, but this never could. In fact, it couldn't even shoot within 6. Second, it had the max range was different for 3 different attacks. You had kind of like a weight of dice attack that was 2d6 attacks, 3s and 3s, no rend, 2 damage, that had the best expected value against at least no save. It was doing a little better than 6 wounds against something with no save, but then that gets bracketed pretty quick because it didn't have rend. And of course its attacks were kind of variable, but then it had 18-inch range. Then you had a long range shot that could go 36 inches, but we're not seeing that kind of range in 4th edition much anymore. So again, keeping that in mind, even if they still had that, I wouldn't be surprised that they'd rain it down. But it only had 1 attack. It was hitting on 2s, then 3s, -2, and then doing D3 plus 3. But that was doing a little under 3 wounds before you account for the save, and then cutting that down against a 4-up save because of the -2 rend by 5/6. So let's say somewhere around like a little over 2, right? But the middle profile, which is the most comparable to what we're seeing here because it has the same max range, which is still solid at 24. It was 4 attacks. It was hitting on 3s and 3s, but now it got monsterified, as I'm calling it now. -1 to hit, but +1 to wound. And it had a -1 rend still, and had a flat 2 damage. Now it's 2 plus a D3, so we're talking about 3 to 5 damage, average of 4. And it's now getting +1 rend against infantry, which might be your favorite target for this anyway. So it's going to -2 rend now, which makes it more comparable to the elite profile before. And it's doing exploding hits, which functionally makes this feel like 3s and 2s, which actually puts it better than its old profile because it didn't used to have exploding hits. And you can do all-out attack on this if you want. Obviously on only 1 unit if you take multiples of this. The expected value of this one Mortek Crawler shots now is 8 and 8/9 damage with a -2 rend perhaps against infantry, which means you're probably doing 8 wounds worth against a 4-up save if it's infantry. Holy crap. What is this thing going to cost? I have no idea because this is one of the best shooting profiles we have seen thus far in 4th edition. Again, only comparing to 4th edition War Scrolls. Currently, in 3rd edition, it costs 160 points, but I think, honestly, it should be more. Like, that is great output. I've been playing 4 Warp Lightning Cannons for a while, and honestly, this kind of output is really enticing to me. And he moves 5 inches, so his threat range is 29 inches. Holy cow. And that's not even to mention what this shooting phase ability is. In any shooting phase. So you can pick an enemy unit that was targeted by all this unit's shooting attacks this phase to be the target. So you're not going to split your shots, but you probably didn't want to anyway. And how it works, you roll a die. You add 1 to the roll if this unit's wholly within 12 inches of a friendly Mortisan Ossiarch. That's a unit we haven't seen this time around. If I'm not mistaken, that's the new FOMO box unit they introduced the last time they got a new unit. So we haven't seen what his War Scroll looks like. But if they're standing wholly within 12 inches of one of these guys, add 1 to the roll if any other friendly add 1 if any other friendly Mortek Crawler units picked that enemy unit to be the target of this ability this turn. It doesn't. Well, yeah, it had to have been one that it shot at as well. On a 4-up, the target has strike last for the rest of the turn. Amazing. So, what is this really saying? On a 4-up base, but if you're standing around this guy, which you want to be, then on a 3-up, and then on a 2-up, if another Mortek Crawler in your army, so there is some kind of benefit to having some redundancy here, if another Mortek Crawler shot all of its shots at another unit, tried, and then failed, because obviously strike last doesn't stack, so there's no point in doing this again. So it tried, but then let's say it also had a 3-up, it failed that. Now you're getting it for your next attempt and any further attempt on a 2-up. Solid. So it's probably going through this tech for giving a unit strike last. Granted, it only has rend -1 against non-infantry, so if you're not going against that type of unit, you're probably not necessarily trying to give the infantry strike last. You're trying to give something, maybe elite infantry like Kroxagor or something like that. But, still, it's doing a lot of damage and has a tactical benefit and has some value for stacking. And I didn't cover this before, but when we look at the factions that are coming, the formations, we've got one that's for massed Mortek Crawler artillery in fortified positions to obliterate key targets. I'm on board. Personally, there's a part of me that wants to buy 4 of these guys right now. Just because it sounds like it's right up my meme list, my alley. I'm psyched about it. And then there's another one for Tireless Cavalry, so we're going to have a cavalry build. Of course, they only really have 2 cavalry models as far as I'm aware. And then, or waves of endless Mortek guard that grind on the enemy. It sounds like hordes that have a lot of recursion. That is not my playstyle. But if I had to pick a death army to play, it had always been OBR. I play Tomb Kings now in Old World. And the fact that my favorite model in the unit or in the army is now like very viable, even compared to just 4th edition War Scrolls, makes me super excited. So if this isn't positive enough for you guys out there, I don't know what is. But yeah, I think now that I'm thinking about it, I might scoop some of these guys up real quick. I'm definitely all psyched. So, cool. Let's move on to... by the way, I am curious what the Gothizzar Harvester is going to do, because this is another one of my favorite models in 3rd edition. So we'll have to see. All right, and then just looking at the Kavalos Deathriders, so here's a unit that's got a Spearhead War Scroll, but this also got a glow up even for a Spearhead War Scroll. So the wheel is still the same. What are they doing? And they still have the 6+ ward down here, even in Spearhead. They're spears, okay? So they used to have a choice between blade or spear. What you're really choosing was more range for the spear, but then you were giving up a point of to hit. So you were on a 4 up to hit instead of a 3 up to hit. Now we know that everything is on, what's it called? Everything is on 3-inch range, right? Now what they used to be for even their better weapon was 3 attacks, 3s, 4s, -1, 1. That's what they got now, and now they have 3-inch range. So you didn't even have to give up anything to do that. And then they now, evidently, if the Spearhead War Scroll stays the same, have charge +1 damage. So it doubles their output. And I can't imagine they're not going to have essentially Naterite weapons, which is exploding hits. It could be that they only have exploding hits and not the +1 damage. But even still, I see this War Scroll as having gotten a buff. Now, they don't have the extra 3-inch pile-in that they used to have on the charge, and they're not doing the mortal wounds on the basis of their unmodified charge. At least the Spearhead War Scroll is not. Let's keep that in mind. It used to work on the basis of an unmodified charge. Let's say you rolled an average 7, then for every 5+ you did a mortal wound, so that's coming out to, 1/3 of 7. So it's somewhere around 2 mortal wounds. Let's do that real quick. 2 and 1/3 mortal wounds. Now what it's doing, according to this, is that you pick an enemy unit that you moved across, and then on a 2-up, you do D3 mortal damage on that enemy unit, which comes out to 1 2/3 mortal wounds. So it's doing less on average, but because of at least how the wording's here, it's a unit you moved across, so it doesn't even have to be the one you charged, which might be interesting. You could have passed across something on the way to getting to your target, so you could kind of hit 2 different units that turn. So anyway, I think this unit is seeing some kind of glow up even for a Spearhead War Scroll. So overall, guys, I think OBR is sitting pretty. I'm definitely positive with these changes, and honestly, seeing as I'm a Cities player that's a little down on Cities just even since the new 3rd edition book, this might be my new Cities type playstyle. Who knows? Maybe I just got to find a color scheme I like for these guys instead of painting them all this type of bone. But I'm pretty big on these guys, dudes. So let me know what you're thinking. What you think of this review. We're done with what is that now? We've only got 10 left, So that means we've done 14, I guess. Yeah, 14 different factions at this point. And we saw at the bottom here that Daughters of Cain's going to be first up next week. The trend that we've been seeing is that there have been 2 order armies at the beginning of the week for the weeks that have 5 days. And then, so Daughters of Cain's coming up. And we have exactly 4 order armies left. So I have a feeling it's going to be Daughters and I think maybe Sylvaneth, because those came out kind of similar time when their battle tomes came out, maybe this week. And then they'll save Lumineth and Seraphon for the last week, because we've already seen a preview of Lumineth, and then Seraphon's a more recent book. But who knows? They could mix and match those. And then we need 3 more Chaos factions. That would be Khorne and Slaanesh. I kind of have a feeling Slaanesh might be next. Plus Slaves to Darkness. But I could see them mixing those up. And those have been on Wednesdays thus far, so maybe expect that. Plus 1 week will double up on that. We only have 1 Death faction left. That's Soulblight. I have a strong feeling we'll see Soulblight this coming week. And that's the one I'm actually the most keen to see, because I just have a feeling that Soulblight players are going to be a little bummed about it. But I'm optimistically hoping that I'm wrong. And then we have 2 Auric factions. For all intents and purposes, I think we all know that Ironjawz and Cruel Boys are being split, and so I'm psyched about Cruel Boys. I've been wanting to start a Cruel Boys army for a while now, and then just waiting for the rules to get better. Again, relative to what's in 4th edition, and then Ironjawz. So, which hasn't spoken to me as much, but that's what we got left, and we've got exactly 2 weeks worth of faction previews left, guys. So after that, we've got about a week left in June, I think, when singles and double teams for Worlds will be going on. So I'm really curious. I think that week Jonas and I will probably do some wrap-ups of everything we've seen and kind of like some thoughts on how 3rd edition was and what we're looking forward to moving forward. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll have seen an article that summarizes, or not an article, that they'll actually release the full PDF of the core rules before then. That would be really lovely. They did that last time too, where we had a chance to read everything and digest it and maybe start getting some FAQ questions sent in before the edition, was actually official. And then who knows when the pre-order exactly will be, how long. It'll probably be a 2-week waiting period. And then how long after that the indexes will come out. So I am so psyched for 4th edition, guys, if it hasn't been clear thus far. Let me know what you guys are thinking about the OBR stuff. Let me know of all the armies that are yet to come, which you're most looking forward to. Send Jonas some positive vibes to get feeling better. And in the meantime, guys, Ryan out.